I'm Helen Norbury, and this is Becoming Unapologetically Me, the show all about authentic self-expression with expert guests from the fields of health, leadership, and mindset. This show is here to show you that you don't need to conform to the expectations that friends, family, and society have of you, and actually what we can unearth when we find the courage to become the unapologetic version of who we are. Grab a cup of coffee and get your notepad out for this week's episode. Hello and welcome back to Becoming Unapologetically Me. I'm really excited today to be talking to Taylor Lashay hard because it's one of those topics that I can really geek out on. So today, Taylor and I are going to be speaking about intuitive leadership. And Taylor, I'd love to start by asking about what your journey has been into intuitive leadership and what inspired you to specialize in this area.
Yeah, thank you first off for having me. I love their little pre-chat, and I know that this chat is just going to be so juicy. The more I was listening into your episode, I was like, oh, this is going to be so good. So yeah. Intuitive leadership, man, what a journey to get here. It has been, as it sounds, it has been a journey of trusting my intuition and then seeing how that has fed into the way that I lead. And, I think what really got me here is I'm a holistic life coach and an energy healer. At this point in the journey, we'll say, because we're always evolving, right?
Absolutely.
And so my journey actually started, I have 9 years of management experience. And that is where the leadership really comes from. I got to this point where I was always the straight A student, really pushing the grades, always trying to be the best. And even in my leadership, it was once I got out of high school, I tried the college thing and I felt very out of place. I didn't go in it and I wasn't one of the people that had all the childhood friends and we all knew what we wanted to study. It was not like that. I felt very out of place and didn't know what to do. So I was like, okay, I'm going to pour into work. That was the only other thing I knew to do. And so I started I was just working a fast food job actually. And this person, they said they used to come all the time. And it was a really bad night after a baseball game. And there was this customer that had been there all the time. And he was like, how do you stay so composed? How do you deal with all of this? He's like, I could never. And I was like, I'm just trying my best right now to get by and get through with my life and figure out what I want to do. And he's like, I really appreciate that opportunity and that quality that how you're taking this. And so I want to invite you to be a manager with me. Awesome. And that is where the journey started. And it was like, whoa, someone's seen some manager? You want me to lead? What are you talking about? I've only ever made milkshakes and my first job was a lifeguard. So I guess I have been in the business of saving lives for a while. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And well, it didn't work out and with him, but I ended up going to a different store with someone else. Who knew this was really where it began? Because it ended up being for a woman that has become a best friend of mine now, one of the best leaders I have ever worked for. She encouraged me to ask questions. She encouraged me to make mistakes. She said, anything can be fixed. I want you to make mistakes. So I want you to mess up because when you can learn how to adapt in that situation, it helps how you lead. And it was
amazing.
Whoa, I've never had this as an example in my family, in the workplaces before that. And then it was when she hit me with, okay, she didn't even train me at first. She was going on a vacation. And I was like, wow, this is a whole new level of leadership that I've ever seen. And so she finally looks at me when she comes back on vacation and we start training. And she goes, I want you to be the kind of leader that when I'm not here, you're me. She said, you're not below me. You are an extension of me. So when I'm not here, I want to know that you can handle this. And just being given that kind of responsibility and that trust and that empowerment to lead that way and not just be like, okay, here's a general promotion, do good with it, pay your bills. But it was somebody was really asking me to step up for myself and for them. And that it really turned something on inside of me.
I bet. It's something I talk about a lot, about creating psychological safety. And my goodness, if that wasn't doing that, giving you the opportunity to fail, giving you the opportunity to learn through your experiences, And for you to know that you could go to her and go, well, I tried this thing, but it didn't quite work out the way I thought it was going to. Eek, we need to kind of sort this out, but to give you the permission to do that gives you the opportunity to take risks that ultimately that's where you're going to grow. It's what's going to allow her business to grow as well. So what an inspired leader, and a shame that there's not more of her in the world.
I know, she is such a great human being. It was also a healing experience, right? Like you said, because so often you try to grow and there's this pressure to get it right. And for someone to say, hey, no, I want you to explore. I want you to get curious. I think that's where the journey of the intuition started to wake up and weave in, because how do you do that when you've been so dependent on other people telling you how to lead? And you've been so dependent on getting promotions from other people and them telling you like, hey, now you can be an authority figure. Getting that opportunity is like, no, you have to see yourself as an authority so that you can stand grounded. And I like, that's really where that journey of intuitive leadership began for me. And now it has continued on to after that job. Actually, that job is what led me to starting to look into mindset. I came across The Secret documentary where it's all about the law of attraction. And that just like one thing literally just kept pulling to another. I remember going to the library, I watched the documentary and I was like, I gotta go get this book. Go to the bookstore to get the book. And then while I'm getting the book, I see the calendar. And then so I start doing the like yearly calendar with my best friend. And then we just go on this journey together and it keeps expanding. And then that leads to a move to a new state. It was a new state, just like it expands you and your mindset because you're so far. My life now, how it looks, is nothing like where I came from. And nothing but trusting my own authority and trusting my own intuition and being curious is what got me here. And that is the journey of intuitive leadership, where I'm not following someone else's rules. I'm not following some other status quo. But I'm also not just shutting it off either, right? But I'm that energy of curiosity, that energy of, I believe in me and I'm going to travel into the unknown, believing in me. And that's that leadership. It's not just how well can you keep up with your books? How well can you keep up with your staff? How well can you hit all your statistics for the month? Like leadership it's an inside job, and that is intuitive leadership.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you actually about how you see or how you define intuitive leadership crossing between those personal and professional realms, because like you say, leadership, you would usually think of in the workplace, but I'm totally with you that I think leadership starts with self-leadership. So what's your view on how like intuitive leadership brings those two things together?
That's my favorite, because I love the yin and yang. And so for everyone listening, I want you to just take a moment and just envision the yin and yang in your mind, right? These two separate halves that come together as a whole. That is what happens when you bring intuition into your professional leadership, because then your intuition takes you to the places where you take care of you. A lot of the things that I work on with my clients is just like what you said, is it's an inside job. You want to hit this goal, you want to hit that goal, you want to step up in this way. Well, let's look at it on the inside. No, it's not always this big, major, deep healing thing, right? But it is still inside. Maybe it's just another pep talk that you need, right? But what is it inside that you're needing to ground and center into to support you in showing up in the outside? And that is, I think, that bridge. And I think I know, and I see it all the time and experience it, because when you trust your intuition and you do that inner authority work of leadership, that foundational piece, however you're wanting to show up professionally, you tend to be more accountable, more radically accountable. So when you are in your own way, it's a lot easier to pinpoint that, like what's going on, what's taking up capacity, which of course helps us in the professional world, because then we can realign, we can redirect, and we can refocus, which helps us manage productivity, manage what we're doing. So you begin to see more balance in the way that you're showing up for your work and showing up for yourself.
Yeah, amazing. Do you find a difference between men and women in terms of their openness to engage their intuition in leadership?
Yes. Absolutely. Definitely, because there's of course this like stereotype that intuition is this womanly thing, right? But I love it because it's just like leadership where you don't have to wait for a company to promote you or some big life experience. Like at any point you can say, I promote myself to a better life. And I think that intuition is the
I
same
love that.
thing.
Yeah.
It's something that we all have. It just it looks different for us. Like I do notice that men actually are pretty tapped in. They look at it as their gut instinct. They're thinking it's more of an
Right.
instinctual thing rather than seeing that they are together. So, I definitely see a difference there in activating that. But men are very used to having to lead already in some way,
Hmm.
but so are women. So it's like talking to them in ways and helping them see how it's already present. Like with my
Yeah.
partner, he doesn't really tend to see himself as this like intuitively tapped in person that can manifest and do all these seemingly feminine woo woo things. But then something he'll say something and he'll turn around. Like the other day, he actually just shifted in his career and he was talking about a position. He's like, yeah, I want to try this. I feel like this is what they're working on and they're cooking this up, but I can't really tell. He's like, but I would love to go try this out. Next day, he texts me and he says, you won't believe where I'm at today. I said, actually, I do believe because manifesting all caps. I was like, trust yourself, listen into where you're guided. And so it's really beautiful to see that like it's not some like intuitive leadership is I like actually have been saying a lot this week. Funny enough that you asked that intuitive leadership is rated E for everybody. Doesn't matter what race you are,
Yeah.
doesn't matter what age you are, doesn't matter what tax bracket you are. It's for
Yeah.
everybody.
Amazing. Yeah. So, what are some of the practical steps or techniques that, so, if someone's listening to this and they're like, "Oh, I quite like the sound of that. How do I go about doing it?" What are ways to start to tap into that inner wisdom when you're within a corporate and quite a structured environment, and maybe you don't have the freedom that you had with that lady that you were working with? So, how does that work?
Yeah, really good question. Definitely, I would say at the base, your grounding practices. And the beauty of grounding practices and techniques is they can look like anything, right? Like it can look like meditation, which doesn't mean just sitting there, but it's the taking space for you. I actually teach a weekly grounding class at a studio, and every time we start the class, I tell them that grounding is all about it's taking the space for you. The fact that you used your class pass or whatever you use to take this hour just for you, that is what it's for, especially if you're listening to this and you are in an environment that is not in alignment with where you actually want to be, or you are in an environment that does have a standard that makes you have to show up a certain way. Really take a look at your grounding practices in terms of your routines, your self care routines. What are you doing for you that makes you feel free? So, not what are you doing to be productive? Okay. Because that tends to be what we think, right? Especially if we are showing up for our jobs. It's like, okay, get up, brush my teeth, wash my face. And maybe you meditate just because you're trying to stay centered and you're not trying to lose yourself, but I want you to really take a look and look at this stuff as not just a routine, but what is grounding me? What practices are supporting me and tapping into me? Because just I was telling I have custody of my little brother as well.
Mhm.
And something that I was telling him the other day is even just when you wake up before you get out of bed, if you just take a moment, say, how am I doing? Because how often do you walk somewhere else and you go into work and you're like, how are you doing? And you're asking everyone else. And then you answer, but it's surface level. It's like, oh, I'm all right. But there's so much more going on. So, honestly, the simplest, most practical thing I could say is take a look at how you're starting your day with you and how you're ending your day with you and how you're grounding throughout your day when you are with other people, because grounding practices, they don't need a routine. If you're stressed out at work and you feel like you are losing yourself or it's just too much, you can step off to the bathroom and you can take a breath. You can check in with your head and you can be radically honest and say, I am overwhelmed or whatever the energy is, right? And just taking that time to be with you. It is so simple, but it is genuinely so profound because that is what I did every day when I started getting up and like doing the self-care routine, it wasn't actually about just ticking the box, because that's what work is teaching us to do, right? So if we
Yeah.
want to be tapping into ourselves and stepping up in our leadership, whether it's to get a promotion in the job that you have, whether it's to feel better in the environment that you are, or it's to start your own thing, you've got to be in touch with your intuition, with
Yeah.
yourself. So
Yeah.
taking up that space daily in some way to see how you're doing is really supportive. And the reason I say the start of the day is just because it helps you manage your energy the rest of the day. Because if you wake up, because this is not me saying wake up and get in a good headspace. This is me saying check in, get grounded. Because if I wake up and I know I don't have the large capacity and I know I'm not feeling well, well, then as I go through the day, I can make decisions in alignment that do not push my capacity, and it helps me be accountable. So maybe I snap a little bit, or maybe I'm feeling a little negative, or maybe I'm all over the place because something really exciting is going on, right? If I know that is happening from the start of my day, I can tap into that more functional leadership and not be letting my emotions and my energy control me, but instead my intuition, my consciousness. I am
Yeah.
consciously leading myself throughout my day, throughout my circumstances.
Yeah.
So then the circumstances aren't controlling me,
Yeah.
and I'm operating how I want.
As you're talking, I'm thinking a lot about burnout, because burnout is such a massive issue in not just the workplace, but I'm going to use the workplace as an example. And it's certainly something I've got personal lived experience of more than once. But as you're talking, I'm thinking, wow, if everybody did that, maybe we wouldn't have quite so much burnout, because people would be checking in when the balance starts to go into overwhelm, and to, rather than just keep pushing through, keep being productive, to actually come back and go, actually, this is getting a bit too much. Like, can I ask for some help, or what needs to happen to bring that back to a place where it feels centered and good? Maybe if we didn't just push through it, then maybe so many people wouldn't be experiencing burnout. Have you seen that as a kind of a benefit of the work that you do?
Yes, it's so absolutely. You are 100% on the money there, because that's really, I've been getting more clarity myself lately. So thanks for the confirmation that helping people with burnout is definitely where it's at, because I keep coming around to this theme lately and I'm like, why does this keep coming up? And I'm realizing like that is a really core transformation you experience is less burnout, because there's less inner burnout. Just like you said, how much of our burnout is a byproduct of us pushing ourselves and not even taking a minute, right? We're not like, I am very ambitious. I definitely am someone like, I don't like to stop in the middle of a project. I don't like interruptions. So I get this energy of like push through, keep going. I can do it very well. It's just, what is that saying about you? How is that you showing yourself that you're not worth even a minute? How is that? It's self abandonment. And
Sure.
and that creates such deep inner burnout, but in a way that, like you said, yes, in the workplace, but I think it's burnout for the soul. It's
Yeah.
like your soul is genuinely so tired of pushing through,
Yeah.
but it's like, where is the balance? Well, it's checking in with you. And I know that
Mm.
seems too simple and too good to be true. But like
You
you
know what?
said,
When I've experienced burnout in the past and I've reflected on it afterwards, I'm like, the signs were all there. I just ignored them. I pushed them down. And like you said, you can't just have burnout in one aspect of your life. So you're not burnt out at work and then absolutely fine when you get home. It's going to just run across your whole life, because you've stressed out your nervous system to such an extent that now you can't cope with anything. So if something little just, extra pops into your pot of things to deal with, whether that's in the workplace, whether it's at home, whether it's when you're hanging out with your friends, it's going to like all bubble over, because it's just generally too much to cope with. That's really, really interesting. There was I think it was a Gallup report at the end of last year talking about, this is the big problem that the world has to deal with is burnout, because particularly since the pandemic, we're just like push, 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 more, 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 do more, do more, do more. Actually, it's a theme of this podcast with pretty much every guest that I speak to. It comes back to just be more, like just be present, just be with yourself. You don't have to do more to prove that you're worthy of something. Just be worthy because you're who you are, you know?
Yes, yes. Like what you're doing is good enough. The energy of like rest is productive. Yeah, the burnout is, I think it really is something deep in our souls for so long. We as human beings have been just working, trying to succeed and trying to survive. And then it's like once we started surviving as a human race, it's like, okay, now we need to exceed that. Now we need to push the limit
Go
even
bigger.
more.
Yeah. So, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges or misconceptions that some people may have when you're trying to integrate that intuition, that insight, that gut feeling, whatever you might call it, when you're trying to integrate that into productivity and leadership and all the typical measures of success in the corporate world? What do you see as some of those challenges and misconceptions that people may have?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the biggest one is probably the one that can live with just about anything, and it's the way it's supposed to look. It's grounding is not supposed to look any kind of way. That's why I love really drawing attention to the simplicity of it being a moment for you. It can be a long moment, a short moment, a deep moment. Like grounding does not require tools. Can you use tools to enhance your practice? Absolutely. Like I love my sage. I do enjoy my crystals, but I'm not reliant on them. I am radically self-reliant. So I'm always checking in with me first. And I think that definitely tends to be the biggest misconception is that it has to look some kind of way or it requires a lot or, a lot of depth or this mass healing or an awakening for you to happen, especially specifically an awakening. I noticed that because I'm more spiritually oriented in my work for sure. And I do come across a lot of people that think that they need to have some sort of big grand awakening. But really, like kind of how I shared at the beginning, it's sometimes often really subtle. And sometimes it's not even born from happiness. Like when I moved out and left home at 17 with nothing but a book bag that led me to this life, trusting that inner fire, I was angry, I was hurt, and I was frustrated. And that energy still got me here to this day. So it doesn't have to look full happy go lucky, but it can. And so when it does, don't shame yourself either. Because even sometimes when I'm like, am having my pretty frilly days where I'm saging the house, taking a bubble bath, I'm like, am I like catering to my ego or is this really what I want? Is this intuitive? Right? Is this genuinely for me or is this because I think it's what I'm supposed to be doing? And when I check in, it's like, oh, no, my body's really sore and my body really loves salt baths. So I am doing this for me and only me. And, that I think I really want to invite wherever you are, whoever you are, wherever you're at in your journey listening to this, you can ground at any point. You could literally be grounding while you're listening to this conversation because maybe the things that we're saying are like resonating super deep for you. It doesn't have to look a certain way. It's really just a prioritization of self because we live in a society that says you should be last. And every time we put ourselves last, it starts to make us feel a little more lost. And so the more you can connect to yourself, the better you'll start to feel inward and you'll be able to have the capacity and the tolerance to let that expand outward, knowing it gets to look like you. Let your practice look like you.
Do you reckon you can go too far the other way and sort of lose all of the kind of the structure, the productivity, we still need to get some stuff done, can you go too much the other way so that you lose the ability then to be attractive from a corporate perspective? An employer might go, hang on a minute, you're sitting here grounding all day, but are you actually going to do any work? Can you go too much at the extremes?
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely can get in this like idea of, I just want to live in a flow state. Then you're kind of stuck there, especially if, like, for me, I found myself on that side when I realized like this was very new for me. So if you are coming from a very like hardwired, hardworking background, you will find that once you get a taste of that flow state, you may want to stay there. But that's when you start not fully completing projects and showing up the way you want. And there's a little bit of self sabotage, right? And so, absolutely, you can get too far on that side. But again, that's where we come back to the grounding practice and this energy of being radically transparent and self reliant and saying, I want to be taking action, being clear on you. And this is where intention work is really important, because if you don't know what you're doing, and this is kind of more into the practical leadership where, a big thing that I lean on is aligned action planning, where after I get my more spirit and my mindset grounded, it's like, okay, now what do I want to do with that energy? How do I want to lead that? So making sure that we're not skipping the part where we are asking how we want to lead all this energy that we just tapped into, because I think that's what gets us stuck is we tap into it and then we don't know what to do with it, right? We don't know how to put it into action. So that's where still leaning on things that do work. So if you are a daily checklist person, keep that for you. And that's why I say your grounding practice, it's a practice. It's meant to evolve, it's meant to expand, it's meant to be layered, and it's meant to look like you. So for me, I love a checklist. It keeps me accountable. It keeps me in a space to actually be leading and taking action. So after I get my mind right, I check in with my body, I check in with my plans, and I say, okay, how do I want to direct this energy today? I know where I'm at. I know what I've got. What do I want to do with it today? Because
Yeah.
then I'm in my being and then the doing, right? Instead of just doing the burnout or getting so hyper fixated on the being that I'm not doing anything.
Yes, absolutely. I guess like anything, isn't it? You're not going to like the best time is when you bring the blend together rather than extreme at one side or extreme at the other side. Yeah.
Yes. Back to the yin yang. Let's see that. Get that visual
Absolutely.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, what are your thoughts on how we go about creating these supportive environments, maybe particularly for women, but for people generally, to encourage people to really express their most authentic selves in the workplace? So, like you say, not getting in that mindset that's like, right, when I'm at work, I do, but actually, how do we create supportive environments so it is psychologically safe for people to show up as the best version of themselves, bringing a bit of flow, a bit of the dynamic side of their nature as well? How do we do that for, to create that support structure?
Yeah. For other people,
Mm,
definitely starting with you. What you do for you, it extends outside of you, because if you're not taking care of yourself to even go up authentically, you can't lead other people in that way. You can't create that space for other people, and you also can't become aware of how to create that space, right? Like, I worked in the warehouse industry for a long time, and I like to say it's very dead energy. It's very like hit the numbers, let's go, go,
yeah.
go, go, go. But every time I was around a person, like, there was just such good energy. They always knew they could come to me. I remember my first meeting there, I was raising my hand, like, okay, but that doesn't sound right. I don't know about this, but what about what that's going to do for us? And by just speaking up and being me and speaking my voice, people started to come to me for all things. I wasn't even a trainer, and they're like coming to me, creating this space, and people who, have never opened up to other people in other ways. And it's because I took care of my capacity. So it opens me up to start to see where that space can be created, because there really isn't a straightforward answer, right? Because it depends on where you're at and what kind of community you're trying to create specifically. But as long as you're taking care of yourself as a leader, like truly taking care of yourself, it raises your awareness and it raises your capacity. And with those two things together, you get to come back to that yin and yang visual, right? You have two sides coming together to create this space for other people where they feel safe, they feel open, and they see themselves as a leader too. And they see you taking care of you. So then they continue to take care of themselves. And then we continue to start to feed into the environments because we actually have the space to feed into those environments.
Yeah. Actually, that really resonates with me because I'm sort of looping back to that conversation of the cross between the professional and the personal realm, because what you've just described, like creating that safety in yourself, kind of allows others to then feel safe to open up to you and to find their own safety. And I found that as a mum myself, when I found my own real safety in being me as a mum, it allowed my children to feel safer and they could kind of hook on to a safe nervous system. And so it sounds like that's exactly what happened in that warehouse example where, you gave people permission to feel safe to share. And so that sort of opened up many more doors for them in the future. So how can we cultivate resilience and maintain our authenticity as things change within our career world? So you mentioned that your partner's just changing and sort of having a little bit of a pivot in his career, but how do we navigate that uncertainty of change, but all at the same time maintaining our authenticity and resilience?
That's such a good question. That's a juicy question. Okay. I'm going to start and I'm going to trust my intuition here. And I'm going to say, start with one, what is your relationship with resilience? What is your relationship with change? Another big thing that I do in my work is we look at the relationships that we have with these things, because part of grounding, again, is like checking in, right? And checking in with yourself. So when you start to see how the self has a relationship with these other things, you can start to figure out how they affect you positively and negatively, which then circles back to our grounding practices and you being able to create practices that support you throughout that. Even as you evolve, these practices can evolve with you because, again, the deeper understanding that you have with your relationship with these things, the better we can navigate them as we come across them. So whenever you're in big change, especially in the corporate world, or you're aiming for big change, and even outside of that in your personal life, check in with your relationship with change. Again, because then you're checking in with you on a daily basis already with your grounding. So you're already tapping into how you're being affected, which in and of itself builds resiliency, because you're saying, whoa, this is affecting me like this. I either want to harness more of this or I want to regulate this a bit better. Right. And that right there, that little bit of effort into you, that is expanding your capacity. That is kind of like, I like to say, comfortably pushing you out of your comfort zone.
So if someone has never done anything in terms of grounding before, and I know you said it's all very personal and, finding the thing that works for you, but where would you suggest that someone starts if they've never done anything before and they're like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea, but grounding, like what do I do? How do I do it? What would you suggest for them?
Yeah, great question. I would say find some sort of private space that you feel comfortable. And it could be anywhere. If that is your bathroom because you live with other people, if it's your bedroom, maybe it's your closet. I don't know, wherever feels good for you. I know not everyone has like a whole room they can turn into a safe space, but find somewhere that you feel comfortable with yourself in your own presence, and then be in that, be in your own presence, and start with the question of how am I doing? How am I feeling? How am I flowing? That is probably the most simplest place that I could give people to start. That really does, like, it builds and it builds, because every day you'll check in and you'll learn something new about yourself, and you'll get to love yourself a little bit deeper through your shadows, through your light side. You'll get to celebrate yourself deeper, and you'll be able to just take that connection. You'll know where to go from there. That kind of full circle for intuitive leadership, because when you take that moment to just get present with you, not present as in be grateful in the present moment, because if you're not checked in with you, you don't want to do that right now, right? So just create a small space or go to a space that feels safe, and start checking in with yourself daily, asking again yourself, how am I doing? How am I being? Not just what we're doing, right? Because sometimes we'll ask somebody, how are you doing? And they'll tell you all the things that they did. but I want to know, how are you as a person beyond all that? And then you'll start to see, like, when, for me, no joke, you guys, it literally started with just an empty room and just sitting there on the floor. Like, okay, how am I doing? How does this feel to sit with myself? Because
Yeah.
you have to go through these layers of discomfort of even getting to know yourself in that way, to ground deeper and deeper. And then now I have a whole office space with all the things, my sound bowl, my candles, but that is not where it started. I didn't, and all of that stuff was intuitively led. It wasn't bought all at one time. It was very like popping up here or gifted there. And it was like, this is for you to support your grounding practice with where you're at in your journey. So just start really simple with asking yourself how you are. Let your intuition literally keep leading the way. Because one day you might check in and be like, I've been doing this and I'm feeling like I'm craving something a little deeper. And the next thing you know, you might be at your first healing ceremony. And then next thing you know, you're in Costa Rica on a retreat. Like, you.
That's so true. You know, when you were saying earlier that you love your crystals, and, you know, I'm saying, I put this on today. I haven't worn this for, I'm going to say years, like a really long time. And I'm like, oh, I just feel like wearing this today. And it's everything that I have got along the way has been a little intuitive kind of nudge, and learning to drop the judgment against those intuitive nudges has been really important. So again, this ring that I wear, I just found myself in this shop one day, saw this ring, and I'm like, I have that ring. Even though it's a little bit too big for me, I'm like, I've got to have this ring. I didn't know what the crystal was. I looked it up afterwards, and the crystal relates to the name Diana, which was my mum's name. And I'm like, oh, okay. I was reading up about this crystal, and there were so many like, oh, that makes sense why I needed to get that ring today, you know? And it was dropping the judgment to kind of get, well, that's not the ring I would have chosen normally, you know, but to just go, no, there's clearly a reason that I need to have this and to connect with it. So yeah, it's so true what you say. So if we look ahead, how do you see the future of intuitive leadership and how it's going to evolve, particularly in empowering women in leadership roles?
Yeah. I definitely think it's going to evolve what leadership means. And a lot of people are going to really genuinely, on a core level, start to separate their worth from their work. I know many of us are working on that. I feel like we're kind of all having our own like mass spiritual awakening per se around separating work, and like productivity. And so I think there's going to be a lot of career change for sure, because I think there's a lot of people, especially honestly, men and women, that have careers. Like, I even did it myself. I have a whole degree for a career that felt like a calling, but it was more of my productivity calling. It was more of, this is what you need to do to succeed. And so I think we'll start to see a lot of career changes. We'll definitely see a bit of an uproar and disconnect as people start to step into that level of authority, because learning to use that can be a journey, as I've learned myself and witnessing others, and figuring out like how to almost disperse that authority without being too overwhelming for some, and while also not shrinking for others in the energy of other people. So there's definitely going to be a little chaos energy. I'm not going to sit here and be like, it's going to be so empowering and grand. Like, I think there's going to be a little bit of chaos.
Yeah. I guess like any change, though, isn't there? You kind of have to find your feet a little bit in the new way of being. Yeah.
You literally took the words out of my mouth. I was about to say the relationship with change, like everyone's relationship with change, I think will start to be tested and expanded, though, where it's like, oh, we can navigate change. It's okay to change, especially when I'm doing it from a genuinely authentic place, as I am now leading and living for me, and not just the outcome that I'm responsible for achieving.
Yeah, 100%. Wow. I knew I was going to love this conversation, Taylor, but you way exceeded where I thought this conversation might go. You know, just so loved having this conversation. The work that you do is so powerful. You know, you're such a beautiful energy as well. So thank you so much for coming and sharing and bringing your wisdom to us in the field of intuitive leadership.
Thank you. This was so good. It was so good. And thank you for your shares, what you shared about, the ring and the connection to your mom, like that. The perfect example of how intuitive leadership plays into our lives in the wildest ways. And so it's been so good to talk to someone about this and just get it out there and share. And thank you for the questions. Like those were really juicy questions.
Well, my favorite type of questions for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Becoming Unapologetically Me. Make sure you subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts so you never miss an episode.